This is the Social Factor.
Alright, everyone. Welcome to the Social Factor. Josh and David, your hosts.
Hello, everyone.
Sunday night, February 4th. That was the new intro that we gonna launch every episode from now on.
Yay.
So this week's topic is going to be a rather sensitive one for some people, especially if they live through this. This subject it's taught in schools. Some people, I don't know if they sort of shelter what they teach in schools versus like the actual like how intense it was, you know. But
it's hard to like translate what actually happened from a book.
Yeah.
Okay,
so with that being said, like I said, there's people who have survived it that still are alive today. Very few, though. There's people that know about it from having their ancestors teach them, kind of tell them about it, tell them stories. So it some parts might get a little audioly emotional, I guess, like that, or graphic or something like that. But
I'll keep it in rain.
We're putting it this way. There's no censoring with this one.
Okay. Good.
even for what even if they censor it in school books and stuff like that. Subject for this week is the Holocaust, and David himself is the grandson of an actual Holocaust survivor. So how exactly did because we're going to be obviously talking about Adolf Hitler a lot in this, because the Holocaust, I mean, he was a big part of the Holocaust.
Well, the public likes to call him the chief designer.
Okay.
But there were a lot of people involved in it.
So, kind of talk about, like, the whole uprising of Hitler and stuff like that, and how he came to power.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, we can keep this very brief regarding Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party regime. Basically, after World War One, Hitler actually was still a corporal, and at the time of I'm trying to remember the date. I think it was 1920. I don't remember exactly. He was actually ordered to kind of spy on this new labor group. So he did. He went there under order, and he sat in their meetings. And apparently one of the...
1919.
1919. Okay, I figured it was somewhere around that time. And apparently he was offended by what was said. He thought it was ridiculous. He stood up in the middle of a meeting and started walking out. And as he did, the head of the organization at the time, and it was a labor union basically of veterans of the First World War, stopped him and asked him to speak to everyone and say, what did we do to upset you? What are you against that I said? Well, basically Adolf Hitler took about 25 minutes and just spat out all this information and how he felt about this party. And the head of the party was so impressed by his charisma and everything that they asked him to join the Nazi Party. Actually the Nazi Party, the word Nazi actually came from the Americans.
So the original idea wasn't of Hitler for the Nazi Party?
No, he didn't start it.
Oh.
It was actually started by a group called the SA. Sturmabteilung is the actual words, and what that means is the storm unit. Okay, they wore brown shirts with black tie, black bottoms, sometimes gray bottoms, depending, and they were known as the brown shirts, and they were basically a labor union for veterans. And I forget again. I probably forgot more than I can remember. Than I've learned, actually. I don't know if I'm saying this right. But let's move on a little. So Adolf Hitler got involved in this organization, and he just flourished. Now, if anyone knows about Adolf Hitler, he was very antisocial throughout most of his life. He struggled. His father was very hard on him when he was young. His mother was overbearing, and so on and so forth. In the 1920s, his mother passed away. She was treated by a Jewish doctor who apparently treated her so well that Adolf Hitler remembered that. And in fact, when he came up to power, he gave that one doctor the opportunity to migrate to the United States, and actually took care of that. Of course, many Jews didn't fare as well. So, long story short, Adolf Hitler wrote a book called Mein Kampf. It's a very controversial book, even back then, and it's still part of reading in most universities and stuff to understand what his mindset was. And he became an ideologue as he grew within the party. He ended up taking over the party, and there was a lot of back in the early 20s to mid 20s. There was a lot of fighting in the streets of Germany, and there were many different parties. There were the communists, the socialists, the conservative Germans, the aristocrats. The derivative of the aristocratic movement, and then there were the Nazis, or the NP, or Nationalsozialistische Partei Deutschland, which is the National Socialist Party, Workers' Party of Germany. So again, the word socialist was actually in the in the Nazi Party. So that's why sometimes people go like, well, socialists are communists. Not really. Often they become fascists, like Adolf Hitler was, and his organization. So let's move forward to 1933. He becomes Chancellor of Germany. He wins. He destroys all the other parties in Germany, and he became the Chancellor. Within 1 year, he became Supreme Chancellor, meaning that he became like an emperor, basically. If you want to think of Adolf Hitler, you got to look a little like at Napoleon. Kind of the same syndrome, okay? Although Napoleon, he was, a French Republic person. He represented the Republic at one time. He ended up making himself the Emperor of France. Kind of the same syndrome that Adolf Hitler had. Now, here's the deal. For Adolf Hitler to become the Chancellor and have the support of the SS, which was a little different from the SA, okay? Adolf Hitler had to get rid of the SA. Okay, the SS was the Schutz, the Staatsschutz, which was a special security force, okay? And a gentleman by the name of Himmler, who used to be a librarian, I'm not librarian, librarian, and who was also an occultist, became the head of the SS. Under him was a guy by the name of Ernst Heydrich. Now, the very odd part about Ernst Heydrich is that he actually was a quarter Jewish, okay? Which I am. I'm a quarter Jewish, okay? Now, what I mean by that is ancestry, blood related. I don't practice the Jewish faith, but I am what you call Hebraic or a Hebrew descendant, and I have a quarter of that according to my genetic code. So was Ernst Heydrich. Heydrich became the worst instrument of the final solution. The final solution happened in 1941. Germany was at war. They conquered quite a vast region between Western Europe and then into Eastern Europe, all the way into Belarus, actually into Poland at first by 1941. There was a conference of the head of the SS and the German government, or the Nazi government. And in that conference, it was 12 people decided the fate of all of the Jews and the undesirable, not only Jews, but gypsies, or also known as Romanis, the handicapped, political people that were a pain or a thorn in the side of the Nazi regime. There was a long list of undesirables. The homosexuals, people that are homosexuals, were part of it. The Jehovah's Witnesses were part of it because they would not partake in the combat or in the politics of Nazi Germany. And that also went to the other occupied areas. The final solution, though, was a death knell for at the beginning, before World War II broke out, and before the Hitler regime took over, so let's go back to 1933, there was approximately 11 million Jewish people in all of Europe. You know, from Portugal all the way to the end of Russia and into Scandinavia as well. Okay. Now, the final solution, and mind you, a lot of bad stuff happened before that already, but the final solution was a means to an end for the Nazi regime, especially focusing on the Jewish problem. And, you know, I hate to say it, the final solution was a big factor in my family's termination. My grandfather was the only survivor. Well, I take it back. My grandfather was the only survivor until in 1963 he discovered he had one other cousin left alive. And that was out of a large family of over 100, some maybe more people, just in the inner circles. My grandfather was from Minsk, Belarus, which is white Russia, but it was part of the Soviet Union at the time. And during the Barbarossa invasion, which happened in the spring of 1941, the German army had 3 million men and equipment, and they marched first through Belarus and all the way into pretty close to Moscow. They were only like 50 miles away from Moscow, and that took a while. And if you look up the one nation that suffered the most losses per capita during World War II, it is actually Belarus. That nation took the hardest hit because it was the first to be hit by the Nazis when they invaded the Soviet Union, and and of course its population was decimated. Now the Minsk, the capital of Belarus, was also the largest concentration of Jewish communities. Okay, and my grandfather was raised in one of those, and it was a very active community. Was in the White Russian, I mean, they were getting along with their neighbors, their Christian neighbors, and and there weren't that many pogroms during the time of the Tsar either, but that's a whole different conversation right there. So Adolf Hitler, while he was the chief designer, had a lot of help doing that. Now, on the flip side, there were a lot of heroic individuals who were not Jewish. Okay, I always tell people that had it not been for good people, and that's including good Christian people, good Catholic people, and just downright non-Jews who risked their own lives to save. I mean, in my story, in my grandfather's story, in his life experience, he survived because of two guys who belonged to the SS. Okay, these were guys who their job was to annihilate Jews. Okay, the Sturmabteilung. I'm sorry. Let me go back. There was an organization that was a logistic side of the Gestapo and the SS. Okay, it was called the OT. Now, Opa used to talk about this organization all the time. They were the logistic side of the war against the Jews and against people meeting the standards that the Nazi regime created. Okay, and from the two people that helped him actually survive on different occasions, one was Oberst Schmidt. Oberst means sergeant, okay, or like a staff sergeant. His name is Schmidt, and he ended up paying the ultimate price because he was executed by the German army, because he was known to help not only Jews but other people like Russians and Poles who were in the camps. And then there was another gentleman by the Gefreiter Klaus. Opa always mentioned him. He actually met him after the war, and that's how I found out about Mr. Schmidt being executed by the Gestapo. Gefreiter means private in let's say in American terms in our military, and those two did things to help. They gave my grandfather food so he wouldn't starve to death, and they weren't supposed to do that. Often, there was one incident where Oberschmidt, my grandfather did something, and it was enough for the Gestapo to get involved. And Oberschmidt, he actually beat the heck out of my grandfather to make it look like he was punishing him when the Gestapo arrived. And actually, my grandfather was like beat to a pulp. But it actually saved his life. You know, my grandfather, I asked Opa one day, Opa means grandfather in German. I said, did you not hate him for doing that to you? I said, had he not done that, I would have been killed. I would have been shot. They would have taken him and put him in a gas chamber. Okay. So, you know, my grandfather, you know, as I got older, I learned a lot more about what happened during the war. When I was younger, he wouldn't talk about it. And that's the thing. A lot of the Holocaust survivors, doesn't matter if they were Jewish or, you know, whatever their background was, you know, PTSD was like the number one thing they suffered from. And other psychological problems often. Alcoholism is very common amongst Holocaust survivors. And it's starting to sound familiar, like Vietnam vets, and, you know, we can associate with people that were in World War II fighting against the Nazis, you know, and that's kind of what was happening. Moving a little forward, I just researched how many actual camps existed during World War II. And I mean, like, there were three categories. There was labor camps, okay, death camps, and concentration camps. Those were, now, most people always think about concentration camps. That was only one of three, okay, different types of camps. And what I found shocked me. Throughout all the occupied areas, including in Germany, there were over 15,000 different camps. Now, can you imagine how many people either were worked to death, were beaten to death, or were executed? Now, Dachau, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, those like Treblinka, these are names that are famous for the atrocities that were caused. And but there were 15,000 different satellite camps and regular camps, and they all had a different designation. Now, I remember my grandfather told me that for a little while he worked in the Stuka factory. Now, Stuka was the famous dive bomber that the Germans used during the Blitzkrieg and other operations throughout the war. So he actually helped build some of those, and they used slave laborers, okay? They used a lot of it because they had this continuous cycle of people coming into these camps, and often they would make room by just executing people, okay? Now, let me tell you this. The Germans, the Nazis, were very brutal, extremely brutal. In their tactics, they were, you know, they were incredible in their military tactics, but when it came to the camps, it was pure brutality. It was pure humiliation. They, you know, the prisoners and the inmates, whatever you want to call them, they had no more personal identity. Okay, their hair was shaved. They were deloused if they weren't gassed. And another thing I want to talk about is the fact that when especially in the death camps, when you know, these trains full of Jews and gypsies and all these categorized people would come into these places, including American soldiers. My grandfather remembers seeing several African American soldiers in the concentration camps, and they were prisoner of war, but because they were black, they were sent. And they also had some Jewish American soldiers that were sent into these horrible places. You know, so America they had casualties in these places as well, besides the military casualties. And, you know, so, you know, the one thing that was horrible, and I've seen pictures of this as a child, was when the SS would come into a community, first thing they did is they rounded everybody up based on their background. If they were known socialists or communists, they were put in this category. If they were Jews, they were put in this category. If they were officials of a community and a potential threat, they were put in this category. You know, they did not like opposition. The Nazis were very stern about that. And they'd come in, and brutality was instant. I mean, it put everyone in shock. So, and if anyone knows, shock value is high when you're extreme, okay? And my grandfather remembers horrible things, like He remembers an SS officer or SS soldier, not an officer, but his, maybe a private, grabbing an infant child from a Jewish woman and basically throwing her against the wall. Okay? And that's, we couldn't imagine something like this happening, but this was very common, When they got to the camps, if there was a large, diverse group that arrived, if you were, let's say, over 60 years old, if you were under 16, if you were an invalid, if you were unable to work or anything like that, guess where everybody went? So many children were gassed. Okay? Many elderly people who were weak were gassed or shot. Before the gas chambers came out, they would dig mass graves, and that's how some of my family was killed in Minsk. In Babayan, it was called the place, the grave. And Babayan was over 100,000 people were executed within a matter of 3 days. And my great-grandmother, Rachel, she was one of the victims. And what they would do is they'd strip everyone naked, and they'd have them line up right in front of the gravesite that they took almost a week to dig themselves. They had the people dig it, and then they were killed in it. And of course, then the Germans had bulldozers, and they would clean them up. And, the things that happened in World War II were downright evil, And the Holocaust was a very, very, it was a very sophisticated, deliberate, and almost like a factory, especially in the camps, in the death camps and the concentration camps as well. It was very calculated, and German engineering had a lot to do with it. Now, I want to go to one of my favorite subjects about that war. Everybody who's ever known about the Holocaust, if you remember, you've heard the chemical that was used as Cyclone B. Okay, now, believe it or not, Cyclone A and B was actually designed by a Jewish person back in 1915. Okay, and the Germans used gas, and this very educated, highly effective Jewish engineer and he was a chemist by the name of Faber. Okay, he designed this, and the funny thing is, by the 1930s, leading into the final solution, he actually fled Germany because he was a German Jew. Before everything really happened, he actually left in 1932 and moved to Canada, and then later on into the United States. He died in 1946, but the funny thing is I was born in a place called Offenbach am Main, okay? And 4 miles from the location I was born in, 4 miles from there, is the one factory that actually created Cyclone B.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president during the Holocaust.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was aware of it, too.
FDR.
Yeah, Josh just said he was looking up which president was there during World War II, during the time. And it was Franklin D. Roosevelt. And, that's a whole different ballgame, because if you look at how everything, from 1939 on, he wanted to help England defeat the Germans. But at that time, the United States was isolationist, okay? They did not want another world war, didn't want to enter another world war, because in World War I, in like 11 months, the United States lost 116,000 soldiers in World War I, okay? So there was a big reason why the United States citizens didn't want to involve themselves into the war. Of course, when they got attacked in Pearl Harbor,
that was a different story.
Then they got pissed off. Just like 9/11, we got ready after that, because it's like, bring it on, However, going back to the Holocaust itself, the way my grandfather described things and the way history described things is that, again, the final solution was cut and dry, black and white. But there were individuals even within the institution, like I described earlier, who made sacrifices even at the cost of their own lives. Okay, and Israel today, and back then already, recognized those individuals as righteous Gentiles, okay, people that were non-Jewish who risked their own lives to help not only Jews but other people, okay, part of the seven circles of hell, as you would read in Mein Kampf, okay, Poles, Russians, and the thing is like the Soviet Union had the highest casualty rates throughout the entire world, okay, during the war, but Belarus, one of its satellite nations, took the brunt of the war because even before Russia was attacked, Belarus was attacked, and we've talked about that. Now, do you have any questions for me before I continue?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that everyone should know what the Nazi symbol looks like. I'm not going to post it on the Facebook fan page. Everyone knows.
You want to talk about the Nazi symbol?
Yeah, well, first of all, talk about the Nazi symbol, and then I have another question for you.
Okay. Well, in Germany, it's known as the Hakenkreuz, okay, which means the Haken is the hatchet cross, okay, and originally, up until the Nazis used it, it was actually a very positive and holy symbol throughout many different cultures in the world. And it's one of the oldest symbols. I mean, it started with Hinduism, and then even Native American tribes used it on their shields, dating back to the early, I would say, the 1300s. Okay, maybe even before that. Mayans have symbols like the Mayan, the Incas. They all had the same symbol, and it was a symbol of protection. It was also a symbol of strength and power. And because, remember I mentioned Himmler was a librarian and an occultist. Himmler had a lot to do with why the Nazi Party ended up using that symbol. Because he was an occultist, and many of the occults, including the Scandinavian paganism, okay, that is a very common symbol. It can be inverted, it can be reversed, and it can mean something else. Now the Nazi Party wanted a symbol of power and strength. And they did. Now, the colors, however, are very different. The colors are the original colors of Imperial Germany. Before the war in World War I ended...
The colors are black and red, right?
Black, red, and white.
Oh, yes, black, red, and white.
Which are the same. If you look at the original German, unified German flag, it was red, white, and black. Now, they took the colors and created the Nazi symbol that we know today, the Hakenkreuz, okay? And unfortunately, Adolf Hitler and his goons, and that's what I'm going to call them.
Oh, of course.
Distorted the actual meaning of that symbol.
I was going to say, dude, I don't think you're going to offend anybody with that. So.
Well, maybe some of the neo-Nazis and stuff out there, some of those idiots.
Yeah.
But,
So Nazis still exist today?
That
actually the Nazi group that Adolf Hitler
the ideology behind Adolf Hitler
ran, that
I met a few of them.
That's still going on. I mean, it's still
actually it's more active in the United States than anywhere else.
Really?
Yeah, neo-Nazi organizations throughout the U.S. are very, very big. England is very big with the neo-Nazis, and that's why I'm kind of surprised that they're putting up with the. Well, we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, throughout the European and Canada has a few of them. I've seen skinheads in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Okay,
Is that like a
that's
a
like
nickname for them?
Yeah, well, skinheads are actually they wear bomber jackets. They have certain colors on their boots. They always have their hair shaved. And it's been like that when I was a kid in Germany too.
It's a bomber jacket. Like to protect you from...
No, bomber jacket, those green jackets that only come in... Flyer jackets, you would call them, that zip up. I'll show you. I actually own a pair. But
okay.
But the thing is yes, neo-Nazi movements still exist. More so in the United States. It's actually forbidden in Germany, but there are neo-Nazis there. Unfortunately, yeah, there are. Yeah. And the thing is the ideology... Germany... Believe it or not, I was raised there until I was 13. And one thing I noticed, and a lot of it had to do with the Allied nations after the war. In 1947, they created a new constitution. and it was under the guise of the Allied nations. And when I say Allied nations, I'm talking about the United States, Great Britain, France. There was another group, and Russia at the time. And they basically, World War One was part of the reason why World War Two continued. And if you look at the entire thing about World War One and World War Two, it was just like a calm break between the two worlds, the wars. But Adolf Hitler, part of the reason why he did what he did is he had a personal grudge against the Allied nations from World War One, because there was something called the Versailles Treaty. And it really, in World War One, the Germans, yes, they did a lot of fighting, but originally it was Austria that that had their king, their prince, the Duke Ferdinand, was assassinated in Sarajevo, and so the Austrians reacted, okay, and so the Germans went on alert. When the Germans went on alert, the French were like, we don't know what's going on, but let's arm ourselves. And then the British from across the aisle, go, okay, something's about to happen. We better get ready.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, they're shooting at each other.
So what's the difference between neo-Nazi and a Nazi?
The word neo means new.
Oh,
okay.
So basically, it's basically like a Nazi, but it's like the new generation.
Correct. And a neo-Nazi just follows the ideology. Okay.
The idea behind the group.
Well,
it has their own beliefs or what?
No, the ideology is that they're superior, and they're and it's usually also known as the Aryan Nation, okay, which is very much an American organization.
So it's basically like a modern version of the.
It is very modern. It's new. It's new. It's you have the old Nazi regime itself, and then after the war, they didn't come out till the 1960s. Okay.
Do you think there's anybody still alive that was actually a part of all that Nazi stuff?
There are still some.
Really?
Some, yeah. I know when I lived in Germany, I lived in a household for 8 years, and our upstairs neighbor, their name was Guck, okay? And I remember he actually, the husband, actually was an SS guy, and he was on the East Front, near the region where my grandfather was, okay? But here's the thing: his wife, she was a Nazi originally, from that era. She was a Hitler Youth, or even no, she was already an adult. So she was married to him. So she was a real bitch. I didn't like her. But my mom told me that this gentleman was reaching out to her. He wanted forgiveness because he knew my mom was, he knew my mom. Her father was a Holocaust survivor, so he knew my mom was Jewish.
Right.
And I talked to my mom actually not too long ago about this, and I've been in their house, and there were pictures of him in the East Front in uniform. All right, and he was very proud of it.
I'm guessing that these people basically just had to go along with the whole Nazi era thing, the people that were a part of it, because otherwise, if they went against it, they would be killed.
Well, and that's thank you for mentioning that. That was actually about 80% accurate. Many people were forced to do things. Now, I give you an example of not cooperating. My grandmother herself would not say Sieg Heil to a political officer.
What's that?
Sieg Heil Sieg Heil is the word you would say. You go like this. You raise your right arm, and you go Sieg Heil as a greeting.
Oh.
Okay. And it means hail to victory. Okay. Which the Nazis took from the Romans, the Roman Empire, and this political officer who was in a bunker at the time, because they were being bombed by the British at the time, gave her only one chance. He goes, either you give me the greeting, or I'm getting a hold of the Gestapo. She refused. She ended up being tortured, okay, and then sterilized.
Was it sterilized? What do you mean by that?
Meaning they destroyed her reproductive organs. Now you wonder how is it that I have a mother, and how is it that she had a child?
Well, I'm guessing that you were. Wait, were you born after this happened? After you were,
I was born in 1971.
You were born after the Holocaust, no shit.
Yeah. My mother was born in 1951. Okay.
Yeah.
It took 7 surgeries from a specialist. It was a very remarkable feat at the time because technology was still pretty backwards, and they had to repiece her uterus just to have her egg. She couldn't have her normal, so they had to put things together, and but she and not only that, but then she was. The German government, the Nazi regime, actually wrote down she was crazy because she refused to raise her hand and say Heil Hitler. Actually, the word was Heil Hitler, but Sieg Heil is another way of doing it. Sieg Heil means hail to victory. Heil Hitler means hail to Hitler. Okay, and they were not Nazis, and they paid for it dearly. If you were not a Nazi party member or belonged to the organization by itself, you did not get food rations. You did not get medical assistance. And one thing, let's talk about, I hate to say this, but Adolf Hitler actually created some good things out of this, okay? Do you know that the reason that most people have an 8-hour workday is because of the Nazis?
Really?
Yeah. Did you know that what's it called? Medical assistance or insurance, like Obamacare, it was in the Third Reich that way. But you had to be a Nazi to be a part of that. So you did not get
to get it, or to decide what actually decide on what it covered, or to create it, or what?
They had universal health care. Is the word I was looking for Nazis. And there were many Nazis.
So whatever, not the Nazis were covered.
Yeah, it was universal. There was all kinds of other things. The Autobahn, okay? Adolf Hitler created the first highway system in the world. But he based it on the American system. But he expanded it, and he used slave laborers for it. Many slave laborers.
What was the workday before Adolf Hitler?
14 to 16 hours a day.
You had to work 14 to 16 hours a day?
Throughout the world it was like that. The United States was horrible with labor laws.
Holy crap, 14 to
16. So Adolf Hitler goes, no, and the children were taken care of. There were laws under the Nazi regime that protected the children of fellow Nazis, okay? Now, it didn't protect anyone that was outside that realm, but if you look at it, he was ingenious with a lot of the stuff he created, okay? Until he started getting a little wacky because of his... it is said that in the end, even before he died, he evolved... He had a Parkinson's disease. Okay. And that's why if you watch images or footage of him, in 33 he's able to raise both hands, but by 36 he's not able to.
So, one last question from me. So it was just Jewish people that they targeted?
No.
Oh, because everybody thinks that it was just Jewish people.
Well, people were focused on it because it was a minority that had the biggest losses, but that's not true. Well, it is true. The Holocaust itself targeted about quite a few different people. As I mentioned earlier, the Jews were, of course, the focal point of the final solution. Right. But you also had Romanis, who are gypsies as we know them. Okay. You had the any political adversaries. Okay. Handicaps. Anyone Down syndrome to being in a wheelchair. If you fit that category, you're going to a gas chamber. Okay.
And that was basically where they locked you in like this, like a shelter thingy,
it's a chamber.
Like a chamber thingy, and basically
what they were actual bathing things. Okay. And they had a metal door, a thick metal door, and they would lock it. Had a little window in it, and and they were showers.
Basically, yeah, and then basically, I'm assuming like gas
pellets.
Pellets?
Pellets. Cyclone B came in pellet form. Okay. And then what happened is once it hit water, it would create a gas.
Oh, so it was pellets that shot in?
Yeah, it was put into this one chamber, and then water was fed into it, and then it created a gas form, and it was deadly. Actually, what Cyclone B is actually a pesticide for agriculture. That's what this guy, remember Faber?
Yeah.
What he actually created it for.
Right.
And they figured out a military use for it. And in World War I, it was used against the Allies. And then when the Nazis came around, it became something more.
Okay. So with just over 4 minutes left, kind of talk about like the fall of Hitler.
Well, Hitler #1 started becoming a little crazy in the end, but a lot of it had to do with the medicine he was getting from his doctor, and of course, after several failed operations in Russia and on the West Front, which is like in France, lost territory in France and so on, Germans had to retreat back to Berlin in the end. The Russians came from the east, and the rest of the Allied nations, that's the Americans, British, and the Free French, they were known as, came from the west, and they all basically at the end met in Berlin, where Adolf Hitler was. His demise, well, actually, it's a big secret because they never found the body.
No one ever found the body of Hitler?
Well, the rumor is that the Russians took the body. Okay. There's another rumor that the United States found him alive and got him into South America. That's just a rumor. That's conspiracy theories.
And I'm guessing
because he has no gravesite.
I'm guessing that if he was in fact taken and then put down in South America or whatever, if he wasn't killed off or something like that, I'm guessing that he could potentially still be alive.
Well, no, he'd be way over 100 some years old.
Oh, he would?
Yeah, mind you, he was born in 1889.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he was born in 1889, and I believe that's the year he was born. And he basically, well, we're gonna look it up real quick. And he would have died already of old age, if anything. But the thing is here's the thing.
He died in 1945, and he was born
April 20th. April 20th. That was that's what the records say. That's what history says. I like to believe he's dead.
What I heard is that he committed suicide by
Eva Braun.
Because
with Eva Braun.
Yeah, with Eva Braun, his wife, as in he convinced her to drink a poison, and then I think it was like cyanide.
It is cyanide.
Yeah,
it was
cyanide.
A capsule they had.
Yeah, so she drank it first, and then he drank it, or the other
he shot himself.
Or he shot himself?
No,
okay.
He shot himself, and Eva Braun took her life with cyanide. But here's the thing. He did that because he didn't want to basically see the Russians get a hold of him. That's what history says. But the fact that there was when the Russians arrived, there was a burned body. Okay. They said there was a burned body, actually 2 bodies, and the other Germans that were still alive said that was Adolf Hitler. Okay. But it was unidentifiable.
It was still unidentifiable.
Yeah.
So, chances are we never actually found Hitler then, and which would mean that we probably would never find him, being that over that amount of time, his bones would already be completely decomposed, and he would just be dirt in the earth.
Yeah. I mean, Adolf Hitler, the chief executive over not only the Holocaust, but over all the occupied areas that he had at one point.
Right.
I think he deserved worse than what he got.
Oh, yeah. Alright, guys. Well, there's today's episode of the Holocaust.
If you have any questions, please send us an email or
comment on our Facebook page. Yeah. Send us a message on our Facebook page. Comment on an episode.
If you disagree with anything I said, feel free to let me know.
Yeah. And thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week with a brand new topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. God bless.